Welcome to Competence Assessment Training 2021. This training is designed for assessor, expert witness, and candidates. Once you have completed viewing this training slides, please notify us. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact Competence Assurance, CA, Coordinator. Let's look at the contents of this training. First, you will learn what do these words mean: competency, assessment, and standards. Second, about our new Work Assessment Manual, WAM, how it works and what benefits this format has. Third, how to perform and complete the assessment as assessor, expert witness, and candidate. Fourth, about quality assurance, mainly internal audit, principles of assessment and rules of evidences. And finally, assessment appeal policy. Introduction to terminology. Competency, assessment, standard. What does competency mean? A competency is a set of specific skills or abilities required to do a job. It's the ability to complete a task effectively. A person should be able to perform various tasks at a target proficiency level to achieve competence in something. What is assessment? Assessment is the process of forming and recording a judgment about a person's skill and knowledge. An assessment is a measure of someone's ability to perform a task to a prescribed standard. When we are assessing someone, we are confirming whether they are performing to a required standard. What is a standard? A standard can take a variety of forms, may also be known as procedure or working structure. It might be an industry-recognized standard or company-specific standards. This is more detailed explanation on the meaning of assessment. According to the Australian Standards for Registered Training Organisations, RTO, 2015. Assessment means the process of collecting evidence and making judgments on whether competency has been achieved, to confirm that an individual can perform to the standard required in the workplace, as specified in a training package or a vocational education and training, VET, accredited course. When assessing competency, an assessor has two possible results that can be awarded: competent or not yet competent, NYC. Competent. If the candidate is able to successfully answer or demonstrate what is required, to the expected standards of the performance criteria, they will be deemed as competent. The assessor will award the competent if they feel the candidate has the necessary knowledge and skills in all assessment tasks for a unit. Not yet competent, NYC. If the candidate is unable to answer or demonstrate competency to the desired standard, they will be deemed to be not yet competent, NYC. This does not mean the candidate will need to complete all the assessment tasks again. The focus will be on the specific assessment tasks that were not performed to the expected standards. How does assessment relate to the standard? This video will talk you through assessment process. We are assessing the candidate's competence against company's occupational standards, that is WAM. Before we go any further, let's look at the main parties involved in assessment: candidate, assessor, and expert witness. I believe all of you are well aware what is candidate and assessor. The expert witness is someone who will carry out observations on behalf of and coordinated by a trained assessor. It is expected that observations will be carried out by a qualified assessor. If it is not possible or practical to have a qualified assessor, expert witness can support the assessment process by carrying out required on-the-job observations. Expert witnesses must meet the following criteria as a minimum: have demonstrable relevant experience in the discipline area in which the candidate is being assessed. Be appropriately qualified in the discipline area in which the candidate is being assessed. be registered, and details of relevant experience must be available for review by verifier, auditor. Participate in a formal briefing session to ensure that he or she is familiar with the standards being assessed and the role of an expert witness. All evidence must be available for review by verifiers, auditors at external verification visits, audits, and copies must be sent to APATO. At FVSP's facilities, in most cases, the expert witness will be supervisor, that is back-to-back of assessor. An expert witness's main responsibilities are to liaise with the candidate for the observation to take place, agree with the assessor that the planned assessment task is acceptable. The assessor will then produce an assessment plan for the task and explain fully the plan. They must ensure communication is recorded, for example by email correspondence. Expert witnesses must ensure that no assessments are undertaken unless prior agreement has given by the assessor. Present evidence to the assessor as per the approved assessment plan. Observe the candidate carrying out normal work tasks or activities. Record details of each task or activity observed and confirm its completion according to the required standard. Complete an observation report. Authenticate any supporting documentation or job paperwork. Record any questions asked during the observation to support or authenticate the candidate's work. Comment on the candidate's technical ability, knowledge of equipment, teamwork, safe working practices, etc. Make a recommendation to the assessor on the candidate's ability to carry out the task or activity. No assessments are to be undertaken unless prior agreement has been granted by the assessor. FVSP's Work Assessment Manual, WAM, is our workplace competence assessment standards which is based on direct assessment method. Direct assessment means assessor observe and question the candidate directly or first-hand. The assessment can be in real time in the workplace or in a simulated off-the-job situation that reflects the workplace. Through direct observation and questioning, main evidence are gathered. Main evidence is also referred as direct evidence. There are two main evidences, that is performance evidence and knowledge evidence. Performance evidence is obtained from observation and knowledge evidence is obtained from questioning. The performance criteria or competence assessed using direct observation, and knowledge criteria or competence assessed using written question are described in details in our WAM. Here is the overview of our WAM, our competence standard. This slide shows overview of standards for E and I module. All of our WAM have the same format. Each module has units and elements of competencies. Elements of competency are the components of the unit of competency. They describe what a candidate who works in a particular role must be able to do. The elements are the actions or outcomes that can be demonstrated and assessed. This table provides a summary of the units of competency, while that next table provides an overview of one unit, element and performance, knowledge criteria. This is a sample of WAM. Module, E and I Technician. The unit is Unit E1. Unit of competence, maintain consumer systems and equipment. The element of competence is E1.1 element maintain lighting and small power systems. In the performance criteria and knowledge criteria sections, assessor has to mark whether the candidate is competent or not yet competent during the assessment. Process evidence record section is the checklist to record the supporting evidence submitted by the candidate. Overview of competence standards for mechanical module. Overview of competence standards for marine technician module. Overview of competence standards for production technician module. We have looked at the new FVSP's WAM modules overview just now. Before we go into detail of assessment, Here is the overview of an assessment process. An assessment should start with a planning, then observation and questioning, followed by evidences collection, and will be completed when assessor giving feedback and decision. This slides show the competence assessment steps. The corresponding evidences being generated during each step of the process are shown below. 1. During assessment planning stage, assessor have to complete the assessment plan and checklist and work assessment manual, WAM. Both should have agreement on the time, unit of the standards and the evidence requirements. 2. At observation and questioning stage, two main evidences are being generated, that is assessor's observation report and candidate's answer to underpinning knowledge questionnaire. 3. After completing the assessment, candidate has to furnish to assessor all the assessment record which was agreed earlier during the assessment plan. These documents such as PTW and completed work order will be supporting evidences. All the evidences have to be cross-referenced with the requirement of the standards. 4. Assessor has to sit with candidate and provide evidence of feedback and decision at the end the assessment. Both assessor and candidate discusses on the assessment performance, decision and way forwards. 5. Finally, for observation report has to be produced as QA sign-off document. FSO Master or Offshore Installation Manager, OIM, will act as on-board for during the assessment. Plan the assessment. It is a requirement to record the assessment plan. Assessment plan is a record of agreement made between assessor and candidate. An assessment should begin with assessor and candidate discussing and agreeing the following. Assessor. What will be assessed? What is going to be assessed? How will assessment happen? How the assessment will take place? Candidate. What do I need to do? What the candidate need to do? When will assessment take place? When the assessment will take place? Planning is important to ensure that candidate and assessor are happy and that he or she is ready to be assessed. Both assessor and candidate will reach the formal agreement during the assessment planning meeting. Assessor has to refer to the specified WAMS module, unit and element for what will be assessed. Direct observation will be method of how he or she will conduct the assessment. Candidate will have to refer to specific WAMS standards, performance and knowledge criteria to know what he or she need to do. When will assessment take place? The agreed information on the date and time with the specific location will be identified in the assessment plan. The assessment plan documents each step in the process of assessing a candidate's performance. It should show who the assessment is for, how the assessment will be carried out, resources needed, evidence required, who will be involved and their role and responsibilities. Assessment plan covers the following points. 1. What is going to be assessed? Refer to standards, that is WAM module, unit and element reference number. 2. How the assessment will take place. Direct observation method. 3. When the assessment will take place. Agreed date and time for the assessment. All the forms or records agreed to be produced by candidate and to be reviewed by assessor. At the bottom section of form, there is a proof of agreement between candidate and assessor. We will now look at how to complete the assessment. In order for assessor to complete the assessment, assessor has to perform evidence collecting, judging and recording evidence. Observation. Assessor presence when the candidate is performing the task. The assessor watched the candidate carry out the task. When the task was completed, the assessor writes up what was observed in a report. This is assessor observation report format and performance criteria checklist, which is taken from WAM. In the assessor's observation report, assessor has to use her own word to describe details of how the candidate performing each activity required in the standard. It is a good practice for assessor to provide the corresponding performance criteria, PCs, covered next to the report, as shown in this sample. While assessor is recording the observations and comment, candidate to ensure all performance evidence requirements are demonstrated and prepare for supporting evidences. This is a clearer view of assessor's observation report. A blank form and a completed sample. Assessor to use assessor's own word to describe details of how the candidate performing each activity required in the standard. On the right side of the report, provide reference of corresponding PCs covered. Assessor should also confirm that job paperwork is available and confirms the activities and that the paperwork can be attributed to the candidate. Knowledge criteria evidence. Within an assessment, questioning is used to confirm whether the candidate know and understand the task they are assessed on. It is important that all the questions and answers are recorded as evidence for knowledge criteria qualification. FVSB's WOM will utilize the written questionnaires to record the candidate knowledge criteria. The questionnaire should be given to candidate earlier than the date of assessment, preferably about 2 weeks. Candidate should prepare the answer for the questionnaire before the date of assessment. The oral questioning during the assessment day, if any, should be also recorded in writing. Some reminders on the underpinning knowledge questionnaire form are: the candidate must reply the answer of the questionnaires in writing to prove authenticity. Date of written questioning must not the same as the date of assessment, as it is illogical for candidate to prepare the answer on the assessment day. Questions must comply with standard requirements, for example Unit 1/Element E1.1. Assessor could refer to the relevant questionnaire databank as guidance. This is a clearer view of underpinning knowledge questionnaire form. On top, there is a section for candidate, assessor and related assessment information. On the left side of the questionnaire, assessor has to provide reference of corresponding knowledge criteria covered. Assessor could use questions from the question bank. All of these questions must comply with standard requirements. Candidate has to reply in handwritten to show authenticity. This section of questionnaire is for assessor's judgment on acceptance and comment on the candidate's response whether it meets the requirements. Candidate has to confirm whether he or she agrees with assessor's decision at the end of this form. Work products and supporting evidences. Both candidate and assessor are responsible to ensure the submitted supporting evidences meet the requirements of rules of evidence. Each of these evidence have to be cross-referenced against competence standards to facilitate the review or audit process. As part of the candidate day-to-day job, it is likely that they could be generating evidence that could be used as part of supporting evidence for the assessment. During the planning meeting, the candidate and assessor would have agreed what work products could be used as evidence. There is process evidence records in WOM, which is also a checklist for the submitted supporting evidence. What should be submitted as evidence must be agreed at the beginning during planning stage. The supporting evidences list is listed in the evidence to be produced section of the assessment plan. Candidate is responsible to gather supporting evidences and give to assessor for review. When assessing these evidences, assessor have to ensure the following. 1. Name of person who carried the task, candidate, is highlighted clearly in all evidences. 2. Records such as work order requires a short statement saying the candidate carried out the activities. 3. Work order have to be completed with signature and date of the area authority stating that the work order was completed, as stated in the standard. 4. All of the supporting evidence should have assessor's signature and stamp of accepting the evidence. Collected evidence cross-reference form. Evidences should be collected in accordance with the assessment plan. Main or direct evidence can be observed or witnessed by the assessor. This could include report on observation of workplace performance, oral and written questioning or demonstration. Indirect or support evidence is proof of a candidate's work that can be reviewed or examined by the assessor. This could include finished products, written assignments or tests, or a portfolio of previous work performed. In FVSB, completed paperwork such as work order and checklist, PTW, isolation certificate, JSA, toolbox talk, maintenance log and feedback form will be considered as supporting evidence. Supplementary evidence is additional evidence presented to assessors such as to support a candidate's claim of competence. This could include reports from supervisors, colleagues and/or clients, testimonials from employers, work diaries, or evidence of training. How to complete the collected evidence cross-reference form. This slide shows how main and supporting evidences are recorded in the collected evidence cross-reference form. In this evidence type column, make sure only the main evidences, that is observation and questioning reports, are listed. All other evidences should be listed as supporting evidences. You should tick accordingly for the available evidences and their criteria item. The respective performance and knowledge criteria items should be ticked if available. Mark as X if not available. The assessor have to verify that he or she have reviewed these evidences and confirm whether the rules of evidence are met. Check for the applicable rules of evidence, valid, current and sufficient, and whether these meet the requirement of the relevant standards. Both candidate and assessor have to sign off the document. Here are some notes for the collected cross-reference form to deem be acceptable by assessor. Performance criteria. Make sure you have list-only assessor observation report as performance criteria. Evidence of the candidate actually completing an activity. Knowledge criteria. Make sure you have list-only underpinning knowledge assessment form in knowledge criteria. Evidence of the candidate answering questions on the topics stated in the standard. Supporting evidences. List all the work products of the task such as the completed work order, WO, permit to work, PTW, isolation procedures, SSPs, job safety assessment, JSA, or toolbox talk, assessment feedback form. WOM checklist. The performance and knowledge criteria items of the standards must be ticked accordingly. All columns must be completed by handwriting to show its authenticity. Assessor and candidate must provide their comments on the completed assessment. The feedback comments after assessment helps in mirroring the information regarding their performance to the candidate and also initiates the learning process in them. An objective, transparent and respectful conversation needs to be conducted during feedback to drive home the points which the participant needs to work upon. Both assessor and candidate must complete the form with signatures. Candidate have to complete process evidence records checklist section to confirm she have submitted the required evidences with the reference number recorded. Giving assessment feedback. As the assessment take place, assessor has to give feedback to candidate so that candidate know what they are getting on. Assessor to provide clear and concise feedback of assessment to candidate. Feedback is the process of identifying assessment outcomes and explaining them to the candidate. It includes describing assessment process, assessor's techniques, assessment decisions and follow-up actions. At the end of the assessment, assessor have to provide feedback on the assessment which must be recorded in assessor feedback form. In the feedback and advice column, assessor has to provide his feedback on whether the candidate met both performance and knowledge criteria. In assessment decision section, assessor has to tick if candidate is competent. In the next steps section, assessor must specify the next assessment unit, element and proposed date. This is a sample of the completed assessor feedback form. Quality, principles of assessment. It is essential for assessor to know how to make quality assessments. To support this, they must have a sound understanding of principles of assessment. This principles of assessment, used to guide all aspect of assessment. 4 rules of assessments are, fairness, flexibility, valid, and reliability. All evidences must comply to these rules. Assessments must be 1. Fairness. Assessments must not be discriminatory or disadvantage the candidate in any way. The individual candidate's needs are considered in the assessment process. Ability to appeal and confidentiality is maintained. When the assessment process is clearly understood by candidates, agreed by both assessors and candidates, and when candidates' needs and characteristics are addressed. 2. Validity. Assessments must meet the established benchmarks and be consistent in a variety of contexts. A valid assessment assesses exactly what it claims to assess. The right performance criteria relevant to role and task. 3. Flexibility. Assessments must meet the candidate's individual needs and include a range of appropriate assessment methods. Consideration of the various needs of the parties involved in the assessment process. 4. Reliability. There should be a common interpretation of the assessments, consistency of the interpretation of the evidence and the consistency of the assessment outcomes. Using same assessment tools, used by different assessor. Quality of evidence and rules of evidence. Assessor has to ensure all the hard copies of evidences that support the judgment decision meet rules of evidence. Evidence must have been confirmed by the assessor as 1. Valid. The evidence is valid if it is relevant to the standards for which competence standard is claimed, assessed. The evidence must be gathered in the correct way, and it must faithfully reflect unit requirement, element, performance, knowledge, to remain as valid. 2. Authentic. The evidence is authentic if it can be verified as being the candidate's own, produced by the candidate. The evidence must be gathered first-hand, not through hearsay or by repute for it to be authentic. 3. Reliable. The evidence is reliable if it accurately reflects the level of performance which has been consistently demonstrated by the candidate. 4. Current. The evidence must reflect the knowledge or skill of the candidate now, not at some point in the past. It proves that the candidate is competent today, that is sufficiently recent to be confident the same level of skill, performance and understanding knowledge exists at the time of claim. 5. Sufficient. Sufficient, or there is enough of it. The evidence is sufficient as it meets in full all the requirements of the standards. There must be enough evidence to have confidence. This requires that all performance criteria are observed and knowledge criteria are assessed when an element is being assessed, that all unit requirements are assessed. Here is some important notes for assessor to ensure quality of evidence in their work. Assessor is responsible to ensure all of her accepted evidences have met the rules of evidence and are being presented as such, through cross-reference them with the criteria standards. These include 1. Assessor stamp to show the evidence is accepted by assessor. I accept this document as evidence, name, signed and date of competence assessor. 2. All evidences are printed with evidence reference, for example, AA 1.1-02. 3. Evidence has reference to the relevant unit, element and performance criteria covered, for example Unit 1, Element 1.1. PCs cover item A, B and C. 4. Name of candidate is highlighted on each submitted evidences to show he had performed and met the required standard criteria. 5. Description to show candidate had met the performance criteria, for example Ahmad gave tips on electrical safety during toolbox meeting, toolbox record. Ahmad used this checklist during the assessment, work order checklist. All the submitted work products or supporting evidences should demonstrate the candidate performance as described in the standards. For example, 1. Work order. Work order requires signature and date of the area authority stating that the work order was completed, as stated in the standard. 2. Completed PTW. The completed PTW must be submitted in a complete document. Name of candidate to be highlighted. 3. Job risk assessment, JSA. Name of candidate must be clearly highlighted. 4. Toolbox talk. Name of candidate must be highlighted. 5. Isolation certificates. Assess must ensure the submitted isolation certificates match and cross-referenced with the PTW. 6. Logs and reports. Name of person who carried the maintenance, data entered in the maintenance log and report. Any spares used or measurements taken have to be mentioned in the report. This is important as they are stated in the standard. Competence Assessment Database. Once the assessment has been completed, the assessor has to scan and email the assessment portfolio to CA coordinator for record keeping and auditing. Appeal process. During the assessment, assessor is required to ensure the candidate understood the assessment and appeal process. If a candidate have a complaint or wish to appeal an assessment result, there is appeal application form to be completed. Detail of appeal process is as described in CA manual. Assessor will discuss with internal verifier, 4, to resolve the dispute. That is either to uphold the assessment process, uphold the candidate's appeal, additional of evidence to be provided by candidate or reassessment by independent assessor. This form requires candidate, assessor and 4 to agree the appeal decision or the final outcome. To summarize the session, we've been able to define what the competence, assessments and standards are. Assessment planning, assessment plan and standards, WAM. Agreement on the what, when and how the assessment will take place, as well as the performance and knowledge criteria parts of the assessment. Direct method assessment, observation and questioning, to obtain main evidences. Assessor's observation report and UK questionnaire answers record. Supporting evidences to be provided, which are identified at assessment planning stage. These include work orders, permit to work, isolation certificates, JSA, TBT, SSP checklist, CMMS reports, etc. Records gathering and evidences record cross-referencing. Principles of assessment and rules of evidence to ensure quality assessment. Assessment feedback form. The importance of giving feedback on the assessment process and decision-making. Competence, C, or not yet competence, NYC. Requirement for all the assessment records to be scanned and sent to HQ for portfolio database update. Okay, we have come to end slide. Keep in touch.